Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in, and down he goes again. Unbelievable! Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Episode 107 of the Last Round Podcast. Thanks again for joining us, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Boxing Socials, YouTube, or wherever you're at, iHeartRadio. We appreciate it. Mike, when did you think you would ever hear, coming off a Mike Tyson fight weekend, when did you think you would ever hear that again?
Never in our podcast lifetime, did I think would be, reviewing a Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr. I thought those days were long gone.
Oh, no. They're very much ahead of us now, my friend. They're very much ahead of us. Legends Only League? Yep. They're here to stay, at least for the foreseeable future. But jumping right into it, before we get into the Tyson, Roy Jones, I guess, exhibition bout out here in Los Angeles, as we'll touch on that later in the show. This past Friday, the 27th of November, from the Seminole Hard Rock and Casino in Hollywood, Florida, on DAZN in the United States and in the UK, because the UK has DAZN now, right?
Next week, I think. I think it's the beginning of December. Right. Everyone chips in. You get that $1.99, and you get amazing fights. Canelo.
$1.99. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and then obviously Joshua Pulev, and then they'll also get, Ryan Garcia, Luke Campbell, all in the first month.
It sounds like we're sponsored by DAZN, huh? Because you're plugging all this, Mike.
I wish.
So this past Friday, the 27th, Daniel, the Miracle Man Jacobs, gets the surprising split decision victory over King Gabriel Rosado. All right, Mike, give me your initial take on this. What'd you think?
It's one of the worst cards I've ever seen. The whole DAZN fight card that night was absolutely appalling. Just bad matchmaking, really. Kind of some of the fights were just too easy. This fight, it didn't really ever get started. Normally, I think we always say, Gabe Rosado's never really in a dull fight. But I think with the age and maybe, the real spite between both of them, Gabe kind of came in with a different style, it seemed, and maybe because he's changed and he's under Freddie. I think he kind of openly admitted that, with his old age, he's kind of thinking a little bit more, kind of maybe like a Bernard Hopkins, he's starting to think about, things tactically better, using his boxing IQ. I thought he should have won. I thought he kind of controlled it, the fight a lot more. I thought he was dictating it, kind of deciding where in the ring they were fighting and where they weren't fighting. He threw a lot more jabs. The CompuBox stats, I believe, were in his favor. I think even the ring announcer got it wrong. That was kind of funny. They kind of renounced him, and he kind of set off around the ring celebrating. And then, Daniel Jacobs kind of was all upset and, grabbed his hand away from the referee and started walking off. And then, he finally got it together. They announced that it actually was Jacobs that had won. I don't think anyone would have been surprised, in my opinion, if Rosado had won, and it was kind of another loss, which he kind of could have gone either way, because he had that fight with, was it Martin Murray in the UK years ago, and I think Martin Murray got some home cooking that night, and I think Jacobs got some DAZN cooking, this night, because I'm sure they want him to have some bigger fights in the super middleweight division.
I think you're saying that people weren't surprised about if Rosado would have won. I think people would have been surprised. I mean, just from a general standpoint, because Jacobs was what? I didn't see the betting odds, but I think we had talked about him in the past, and I think obviously as a boxing fan, we knew that Jacobs was a heavy favorite going into this. So even having Jacobs win a split decision is technically a loss for him, and people were saying that Jacobs might be different now in terms of after the two big paydays with Triple G and Canelo Alvarez. He made what, 10, 12 million against Canelo Alvarez?
I think it was like 12 million, because everybody was using that as a benchmark when they were going to fight him.
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. But he got paid. And then obviously he made a cool couple million against Triple G, fighting both the two of the biggest cash cows in the sport of boxing. And then I think Jacob said in the post fight that he treated the Rosado matchup as like a sparring session, I believe. So he felt like he underestimated Rosado, which I'm surprised that he admitted that. I mean, do you believe that? Do you believe that he really treated it as a sparring session and he just kind of went in there and then, or do you believe that he was kind of caught off guard that Rosado didn't engage like he usually does, and he was boxing him? What do you think?
I could see it being a kind of a combination. I think, Rosado coming in with a different style, but you have to remember, me and you were ringside for the fight with Chavez, where Chavez has won those first few rounds. Jacob didn't look great in that fight either. Is it the fact, like you touched on, he's earned so much money, fighting people like Triple G and Canelo that, now he's kind of just there for a few easy paydays and the hunger's gone.
Yeah, I kind of believe that. I do kind of believe that. I believe that the hunger might not be as what it once was. There's a difference between making all this money in the sport, getting to a payday. I mean, look at Andy Ruiz. He kind of gets the same criticism in terms of saying, well, yeah, he gets 2 back-to-back paydays against Anthony Joshua, who's also one of the biggest stars in the whole fight game. And and people say that he's bought all this stuff, which is more power to him. But the lifestyle and the money kind of got to him. I mean, which is great. He can take care of himself and his family. But there's some fighters out there who that is the goal. Obviously, you want to make money, but like there's also fighters out there that they obviously want to make money, but then they also want to fight for their legacy. And I don't think Jacobs is at that point anymore. I think the money is his legacy, and which is fine. He's made a ton of money. And he can take care of himself and his loved ones and his family and all that stuff. But I mean, barely squeezing by in a hard-fought split decision against Gabe Rosado. And all of these, mind you, all 3 scorecards, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, all 3 scorecards were 115, 113. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
So it wasn't like 117, 111, 119, 109, whatever. All 3 of them were the same scorecard. They were just flipped for, 2 for Jacobs and 1 for Rosado. And then going touching on the initial point you made about the referee, I think he's that Golden Boy referee. He's been the Golden Boy, not referee, the Golden Boy announcer. I think he's been an announcer for Golden Boy for a couple of their events the last year or 2. I forgot his name.
Jeremiah Gallegos.
Right. I think that's him. He at Golden Boy cards, he says it's golden time, which is always that was like, it was kind of funny. But he announces from Philadelphia, and then he says from Philadelphia, Brooklyn, New York.
Mm.
And then Rosado, poor guy, raises his arms up, and then he goes to the corner, and then he comes back and he goes to the referee, and see, that was very telling in that moment. And you tell me if you agree with me or not. But when that announcer made that mistake, when he said Philadelphia, you could see Jacobs put his arms down and put his head down, like, man, he didn't. That tells me that tells me as a fan all I need to know. He thought he lost. He wasn't going to fight it. I mean, what do you think based on that reaction from Jacobs?
No, I completely agree. You could see that he was kind of, upset, but it wasn't something where he was kind of, had a look of, shock, like, oh my God, I've got completely robbed. It was kind of, something that he was upset, but he was kind of acceptable. But like you touched on, I think that I think it just looks like the hunger's gone after those paydays, and, it looks like it is all about the money now, with his split from Andre Rozier, which everyone knows is tended to be about the amount of money that Rozier was going to get from some of those paydays. So I don't know how much Jacobs has got left. He'll probably just do like a Mikey Garcia type thing. He'll just take the biggest fights for the biggest money until they don't come around anymore.
Well, he's a free agent now too. That was his last fight with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom, which I wasn't surprised because if after the fight, I think Eddie Hearn tweeted that neither fighter deserved that win or something like that. Like he pretty much like criticized Jacobs, who was, like you as a promoter, when do you ever see the promoter really criticizing the fighter? I mean, Bob Arum, I guess, is the exception, but just from a general standpoint. But I remember when I saw that, and this was before they reported that this was his last fight under Matchroom. But when I saw Eddie Hearn's tweet saying that popped into my head right away. I thought, oh, okay, that was probably his last fight, or they're negotiating right now. Because why would Eddie Hearn kind of hurt his stock of his fighter like that if he didn't think I think Eddie Hearn knew, like, yeah, he's probably not going to resign. He's gonna, he's gonna go off to PBC or something like that, But I mean, it is what it is. I think Rosado, even though it was a boring fight, people were all criticizing it and just up in arms about it. It was, it was more of a boxing, I guess. Could you label it as a technical fight? Would you go that far?
Sloppy technical, maybe.
Right. I mean, but you got to give credit to Rosado from, if you kind of stand back and kind of disregard the whole boring aspect. He went with Freddie Roach, and Freddie Roach kind of gave him a game plan that pretty much, in a lot of people's eyes, probably should have gave him the win. So, like, imagine if Rosado would have won, where that would have put him. Like, you would have saw like Billy Joe Saunders or any of these guys like, oh yeah, I'll fight him. He beat Jacobs. And because I think we all know at the end of the day, like, Rosado would still be the underdog against all these other middleweights, BJ Saunders, Canelo, Triple G, all these other guys, Jermell Charlo and stuff like that, But, it is what it is. Rosado just always finds a way to get back in these big fights. You can't say that he's never fought. He's never fought these big names and these killers, because he has. I mean, he has. That's why he has so many losses, because he agrees and he fights these killers. And I think ultimately, even though with like 12, 13 losses now, it's to his betterment as a recognized name, because he's been getting like movie roles, Hollywood opportunities, and these big opportunities with fights and decent paydays against like Jacobs and Triple G and stuff like that. So it is what it is. I think Rosado will still stay in there and figure it out and see where it goes from there. But where do you think Jacobs goes from this point?
I think you'll probably see him end up somewhere like over in the PBC, because the super middleweight division seems to be dominated really by Matchroom, DAZN fighters, and the PBC. He's just obviously left Matchroom and DAZN. So I think the next obvious landing spot would be probably PBC.
What do you think? You think he goes to PBC and maybe fights like a Caleb Plant, David Benavidez, the wild card out there who doesn't have a major promoter right now is Zurdo Ramirez. But he fights at light heavyweight. Never mind, that's different. But Caleb Plant, David Benavidez, PBC. I mean, are those realistic fights? What do you think?
I would say so. PBC signs them up, keep them in-house, kind of keep generating that money in-house over and over again like they do with the welterweight division. So it kind of makes sense.
I think, is Jacob still advised by Heyman? I believe he is, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Right? I think so. I don't think I've heard anything different. But obviously if he is, which I don't want to see why he wouldn't be, then, Heyman's going to be like, well, yeah, just come back over here. We got you paid over there. Now come back and repay it under our banner, completely. I could see it. Moving on. This past Saturday, the 28th of November, from the Church House in London on BT Sport and ESPN Plus. Mike, Sam Jones was right. All that word he was preaching in our last episode last week, he was right. The juggernaut, Joyce, remains undefeated with a 10th round stoppage over Daniel Dynamite Dubois, who suffers the first loss of his career. Joyce gains the European, Commonwealth, and British heavyweight titles. Mike, what'd you think of the Juggernaut?
A lot of people before the fight were saying, Daniel Dubois early on, Joyce, if it goes into those late rounds. A lot of people, who speculated that, spot on, we're right on the money. I think a lot of people were thinking that Daniel Dubois would be, too young, too quick, too strong, for Joe Joyce, who I think, a lot of people say has a very slow, very awkward, kind of looks like he's fighting underwater, very predictable. A lot of the punches you can kind of see coming for a mile off, but it works. It worked for him. His jab, I don't think he missed. It was like a heat-seeking missile, and it was so weird because he kind of throws it with his shoulder. He doesn't even turn it over. There's no snapping it, but he couldn't miss. I just don't. Just one of those awkward styles that just seems to work. And he's got probably the greatest chin in boxing at the minute. He just doesn't even have any head movement. He just kind of blocks it with his face, Homer Simpson style. Wears people down. And then, he just started to work with that jab on the eye. And that was it. I think it was second or third round. He started to swell up and he just went to town on it. And it looked like Daniel Dubois, having a good amateur career, kind of turning professional. And, his family from a young age decided that, that him and his sister were going to both be professional fighters, wrapped him up in cotton wool. And from a very young age, they were like, right, you're not going to be a top tier athlete. And I think it looked like that was the only time he'd ever really gone through any kind of troubles in a fight. Because you could see he was kind of panicking in the corner. You could see early on that it was kind of, when the eye was starting to swell and he couldn't really see. He didn't like it. He was kind of looking for a way out because, he got caught. I think it was with a jab. And then he kind of stops for a second and then just took that knee and, kind of took the way out that he could. And you've got to wonder from there, is that world championship mentality? I know there's obviously been, Klitschko and people like that have, taken a knee in a fight, taken the way out. And, it's either that old saying, is it, do you live to fight another day or do you go out on your shield? He could take the Klitschko way, go back, never really affects him mentally at all. And he goes on to be a world champion. He could have stayed in, ended up like Kell Brook. He could have carried on taking a lot of punishment, come out with a broken eye socket, something, maybe even something worse. And then, his career's over before it's even begun. He's 23 years old for a heavyweight. That's a baby in heavyweight division.
I'll start with Joe Joyce. The Juggernaut, like you said, that jab just didn't seem like it missed. He just connected. And like you said, I think I might agree with you. I in terms of the best chin in boxing, like he took some shots too. And Dubois is what, 6'5", and Joyce is 6'6". Like these are big boys. These are huge men. Like those shots, they're not pillows. Like you said, like people criticize Joe Joyce for, it's kind of like slow motion and stuff like that. But like, I like to see those people saying it's like slow motion and whatever. Go in there and take a punch in slow motion from him, But I think not the X factor, but the difference, and you tell me if I'm wrong, is that Joe Joyce is, I think the pedigree that he had from the Olympics as a silver medalist, I think is a very big difference because Dubois was, had the amateur experience and stuff like that. But making the Olympics in any form, in any sport, especially in boxing and fighting, it's very difficult. It's very difficult. And having that pedigree, look at typically all the guys with some type of Olympic pedigree, especially like silver medalists, gold medalists, and stuff like that. Andre Ward, Oscar De La Hoya, Floyd Mayweather. We got January 2nd against Ryan Garcia. Luke Campbell. I know Luke Campbell hasn't really had that signature win, but he's been in there with some of the best fighters in the world. When he fought Lomachenko at 135, he gave him a pretty good fight.
Linares?
Linares, same thing. So that Olympic pedigree, especially when you actually win a medal, that's no joke. Look at Wilder. training, he begins boxing when he's like 19, 20 or something, or however old he is, and wins a bronze medal, like, and obviously look at where he's at now, one of the most successful heavyweights in the game. So that Olympic pedigree is no joke. I think that really separates these fighters from the rest of the pack. And I think that's what helped Joe Joyce kind of overcome and kind of pretty much get the win against Dynamite Dubois, which, kind of now turning my attention to Dubois, touching on the fact how you're saying, did he quit? Should he have that winner's mentality or that fighter mentality going out on his shield, or, willing to fight another day, to recognize like, hey, you know what? I can go out on my shield, but this could end really badly. And like you brought up a really good point with Kell Brook. Kell Brook, did that twice against Spence and Triple G, two of the biggest killers in the game. And both eye sockets were affected. It wasn't just one, it was both of them. So you don't think other fighters see that and they're just like, oh, you know what? Like, your face, you need your face, not just for like boxing, but for everyday things, routines, and especially if you're in a sport where you're getting punched in the face at like full speed or whatever, you got to think about that. So can he be criticized that he didn't go out on his shield and blah, 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 blah? I give him a pass because it was a good fight and his eye was shut. And did they confirm or did they release? Did he get an MRI or anything like that? Was it actually damaged, like the eye socket or orbital bone or fracture or anything like that?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what the diagnosis was, but there was an injury.
So there was something there. So, like you said, going back, he's only 23 years old, 6'5" heavyweight, 23 years old. He just suffered the first professional loss of his career, and he's out of 16 fights, he's only lost once. And it wasn't like he wasn't doing decent in that fight. He was getting his shots off too, like you said. Like Joyce just has a really good chin, but I can't give him the pass. I'm not gonna jump on him for, I don't want to say the word quitting or stuff like that, because his eye was shut, and obviously if there was something diagnosed or if he felt something, and they were already giving us a pretty entertaining fight. It was a decent fight, between these two up and coming heavyweights who. Now, obviously, it's Joe Joyce, but the winner was looked at as a pawn to get a shot at a decent name in the heavyweight division. And Joe Joyce seems like he's on the pathway to do that. They're mentioning Alexander Usyk as a potential opponent now. But either way, going back to Dubois, 23 years old. I think it was a smart move in terms of his career. He still has a lot of years ahead. He's still going to be in this game a lot longer than Joe Joyce. Joe Joyce is 34, 35 years old, Let Joe Joyce get, maybe 2 or 3 big names under his belt, get a couple paydays and retire in the next couple years. Whereas Dubois still has maybe a good 12 years left, 12, 13 years left in the fight game, as long as he can kind of compete at a high level. Decently, So, I wouldn't even mind seeing a rematch. I wouldn't mind it. What do you think?
Do you think that the corner should have saved him from himself? Because now he's always going to have it in the back of his mind that he quit. Whereas if the corner had just thrown the towel in, he can always have it, he can always kind of blame them, and have it in his mind and kind of convince himself that, you know what, I would have knocked him out. I still would have won that fight. You threw the towel in, where, he can try to convince himself, kind of like Wilder. Wilder's corner threw the towel in, and Wilder's trying to convince himself that, he would have gone on to win that because he has that one punch knockout power, which Dubois does. And I do wonder, whether it would have been better for his corner just to have thrown the towel in just to save him for another day, instead of him having to, quit. Because, every press conference that he goes to now, the opponent's going to say, like, I'm going to win this. Once a quitter, you're always a quitter. Once you've looked for that easy way out once, you'll do it again.
Right. Yeah, they will definitely, his future opponents will definitely go after him like that. more of like a mind game. I guess they're going to do that. So, it happens. It's a sport of boxing. It's also a form of entertainment. But, you tell me this because you might be more familiar with the dynamic that he has, the relationship he has with his corner and his trainer and stuff like that. Obviously, if you're going to throw in the towel for your fighter, you want to make sure that they're not going to kind of resent you for it. Initially at that initial moment, they might be pissed off like a Wilder was. But if you've been training this fighter a long time and you've risen through the ranks and stuff like that, and you throw in the towel for that fighter, in this example, Dubois' corner, and because you see like, hey, you know what? I got to stop this. I don't want to see my guy get hurt. Yes, you give the Dubois like a way out in terms of the public opinion because he's like, hey, I didn't quit. My corner quit for me. But there's also the chance that, like you mentioned, you brought up a good point of Wilder. Who was his trainer again? The guy who threw in the towel? Mark Breland.
Mark Breland, yeah.
Mark Breland had been with Wilder for how many years? And threw in the towel. Obviously, he felt comfortable enough to throw it in. He's like, yeah, I'm going to throw it in. He's going to be pissed at me, but he's going to get over it because we know each other. I've been with him for a long time. And look at what happened. Wilder is still pissed off about it that he let him go. So, I'm trying to remember what the corner talk was for the Dubois corner. Like, were they touching on that? How was the corner talking to him during that time, especially when his eye was obviously getting hit?
The corner work I didn't think was great. I thought they just kept telling him the wrong things. There wasn't a change up in the game plan to try to really get round that jab. It seemed to be that Dubois was just doing the same things over and over and over again. Even though it wasn't working, there was no plan B, there was no plan C. And the corner team should never, be stronger than the fighter. It shouldn't get to the point where Dubois quitting. The corner team should do it for him. In my opinion, they should save it because even if he's pissed at you for a week, a day, a month, eventually he's going to calm down. And when he watches the fight back, you can see, and hopefully all those years you've spent together, you've built up some kind of rapport to the point where eventually he'll thank you for it later down the line. I think Wilder is an exception because look at the wild, idiotic stuff he's come out with since then. So I don't necessarily think that's, a great comparison. It's a recent comparison, but I think he's just come out with some absurd, types of things, down the line to blame everybody but himself.
Right.
But to me, I think Dubois kind of needs to look at his corner because on that performance, literally just beaten by a jab, literally Joe Joyce didn't really do much else because you could telegraph a lot of Joe Joyce's hugs, and Dubois did, and would actually get out of the way of those. He would go under those. He was literally just beaten just by a jab. I think he really needs to go back to the drawing board. I think, he needs to look at, his coaching team, maybe his sparring. Does he just always spar with people that he's getting the better of? Because it really looked like he'd never faced any adversity in his life, which is, he's had a good amateur career. He was part of Team GB. I don't know if his amateur career was as long as obviously Joe Joyce, because he'd been through everything. You could see just Joe Joyce walk into the ring for definitely his biggest pro fight. It was really, win or bust for him because of his age. He didn't look like, nervous or bothered at all. Just came down to the ring, cool, calm and collected. He got in, kind of stared down with Dubois. And Dubois was a big boy to look at. And he wasn't phased at all, went in there, just stuck to his game plan, jab, 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 all night pretty much. Comes away with the win. It kind of just showed that it was a step too far at this period of time for Daniel Dubois. And it was kind of funny because Frank Warren promotes both and had put all of his eggs in that triple D basket. So I do wonder now, if I was Joe Joyce, depending on how many fights he has left with Frank Warren, do you now fly the nest and go to Eddie?
I could see that. Eddie would welcome him with open arms.
Eddie's got a lot of, British level fighters that would be a good payday for Joe Joyce. Obviously, Derek Chisora, Dylan White, obviously Anthony Joshua. He has a few, obviously, of the foreign guys as well. Hergovich, I believe, has a co-promotion with them. And over at Frank Warren, you've got a couple of the young guys, David Adelaide that was on the undercard. And obviously, Tyson Fury's there as well with the Frank Warren / Top Rank co-promotion. So with somebody backing against you that much, I do wonder, if deep down you would be kind of pissed off that.
Do you think that any of the mental aspect of, because like you said, Joyce can take a punch, and Dubois, it's not like Dubois didn't touch him. Like Dubois did touch him a few times, and like you said, Dubois is a big boy. There's the two big boys, 6'5" and 6'6", respectively, and he saw that he lives up to his name, the Juggernaut. He just keeps coming. He just didn't stop. He got hit, and he hit him with, all of his power, and he kept coming and coming and coming. Do you think in terms of a mental aspect that also might have affected Daniel Dubois in terms of saying to himself, man, I'm hitting this guy, and it doesn't even seem like it's hurting him. And maybe he just kind of started psyching himself out of it a little bit, or maybe where it started affecting his actual fight game or his actual boxing ability. And Joe Joyce was just touching him with the jab. I mean, like you said, like that jab didn't miss. That jab didn't seem like it missed. And it's like, what? Like, how are you getting touched so many times by that jab? Like, you're just getting touched and touched and touched. Like, you would think after a couple of times, like you just, like people criticized, like you said, they called Joe Joyce slow and kind of methodical, like, he's kind of slow motion. I mean, if he's really is slow motion, how are you getting touched by this jab all the time? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I mean, but going back to my original question, do you think any of that mental aspect affected Daniel Dubois?
I believe so. I think because he's so young, and like I've kind of said a few times now, I think it's just the fact that he's just the adversity. He's never been through it. He's kind of had everything his own way. Nearly all of his pro fights, didn't really go out the first few rounds. And I'm sure as soon as people kind of felt his power, they kind of started to wilt. And then when he was facing Joe Joyce and that wasn't happening, and he was getting into the later rounds, even though absurdly he was up on the card somehow, I don't understand that.
I know.
I think he just got to him. Then he started to get the eye was closing. You probably thought he was losing on points because he should have been losing on points. And he just kind of took a knee, go away, back to the drawing board.
He'll be back.
Yeah, he'll be back. Definitely he'll be back. Go away 2 years, 3 years. He's only 25, 26 by then. Still young in a heavyweight career. Get some wins, fight some journeymen, fight some guys that are going to give him those tests that he's not had yet. So when he comes back in a big fight again, he's not facing those for the first time. He's not facing somebody where, oh shit, I can't get around his jab. And then he knows how to do it. He's facing somebody that's not going to just roll over the first time he connects with him, because Joe Joyce has just got an unbelievable chin. He's no head movement at all, but an unbelievable chin.
The Juggernaut. Okay, what's the likelihood that Dubois, he'll probably have like a comeback fight or try to get his confidence back and, something like that. But what's the likelihood that he says like, hey, I want the rematch? I'm sure he might say it and he's open to it. There's a difference when people are saying, oh yeah, I'm open to it. Like I hate when fighters, like people, like you see these articles and stuff like that. Like, oh, so-and-so open to a Canelo fight or so-and-so open to a Triple G fight. Well, yeah, they're open to it. That's a big payday. But being open to a fight and actually saying you want the fight, like, yeah, give me that fight. There's a difference. Mm-hmm. Like you can ask, like, that's a general question. Like, hey, well, what do you think about Canelo? Would you be open to that fight? Yeah, I'd be open to that fight. Why not? I'd be open to it maybe in the next year or two. Like, that's such a generic question. Like I'm sure he would say he's open to that fight, the rematch. But do you think based on his personality and maybe Frank Warren in combination with him would try to push for that rematch? Hey, I want the rematch with Joe Joyce. I know I can beat him. Do Do you think that's realistic?
No. I mean, he may want it, mentally, convinces himself that, if it wasn't for the eye, that he would have won, and he probably would have done due to the, craziness of the scorecards. But realistically, no, I don't think so. Watching it, I think that, Joyce would probably do the same thing. He just, he literally just got beaten down by a jab. That was it. Nothing else. Just a jab. So he needs to go away. And, having been a very, well-schooled Team GB amateur, it was kind of strange that he never really, kind of worked against that. Had somebody that was literally just, peppering him with jabs, and he was kind of lost.
That's why what's very surprising about it, like he got beat by the jab.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Strange for somebody to be at that level, British, Commonwealth, European, and he was mandatory with Usyk for the WBO.
Right.
He put all that on the line for this.
Yeah. But you got to give it to them. They went up against each other, at this point.
Oh, no, yeah.
Like Joyce needed this type of fight. The
Definitely,
recognition, he needed it. Dubois could have still kept going without it and been like, yeah, I'm not, could have went to the Gervonta Davis fight where like Gervonta Davis route where Mayweather every year he says like, oh yeah, we're not chasing Lomachenko. He's, we'll wait. He needs to wait for us. You can go back 5 years with Mayweather saying that about Davis and Lomachenko, but you got to respect their willingness to put their undefeated records on the line and go up against each other at this point in their careers. I mean, I think it was great. I think it was great for them to do that and give a fight like that, a heavyweight matchup like that to the fans. So, but I don't know. But do you think Joyce gets Usyk in the future or maybe immediately?
I think he will probably take the biggest fight for the biggest payday because of his age, because of how much his stock has risen. Because beforehand he was, he was kind of a joke. That might be a little bit harsh, but a lot of people, he kind of fights so slow, so methodical. Looks like he's fighting underwater. Used to come to the ring with that Mexican hat, like Mexican Joe and stuff like that. You'd see a lot of memes about him, and he's not that great on the mic. And then after this weekend, completely different on Twitter, completely different all over social media about how good he is, how good that jab is. So if I was him, you need to capitalize off how high his stock is, his age. I think he's just going to be chasing the money fights now because boxing's a business,
Right.
At that age, you need to get in and get out. So
I think there was just a lot more people watching him for the first time or, they were more interested in this matchup. Like especially the American fans. There was a lot of American media and a lot of American boxing fans on Twitter who were tweeting about it. And like you said, like, people kind of called him a joke in the end or something. It wasn't that he wasn't a good fighter. It was just more like, he's kind of slow and slow motion. There wasn't anything like appealing about it. But I think with the hardcore boxing fans like me and like, well, he's a dangerous fighter. That's what they call him, the Juggernaut. He might not be the best on the eyes, but he could fight. You put him in there with another heavyweight, like he's most likely going to win, depending on what it is. But I don't know. I think Joyce is going to get a decent payday. I don't think he's going to fight Usyk right away. I think Usyk is really going to try to chase Anthony Joshua because I think he's the WBO mandatory, I believe. And Joyce is probably going to go maybe Chisora, maybe. I mean, what do you think?
If he doesn't take the Usyk, because the two fights that he has that have a storyline to them are obviously Usyk from his time in the World Boxing Series,
right?
And then also obviously Tony Yoka, who beat him for the gold medal. So those are the two stories that he's got that he could use, that would kind of sell. But if you look at it in terms of just literally trying to cash out, then I would say maybe some of those British dust-ups would just be, bigger paydays.
Right.
Even though they don't necessarily hold a world title, you could probably, sell out crowd in Britain if it's next summer, pay-per-view, over somebody like an Usyk, which is a better name. It would be for the WBO title. but does it sell as much? Is Usyk, pay-per-view worthy?
No.
Maybe in the UK because of the diehard fans and the fact that he's fought Chisora and he's fought Tony Bellew, so they kind of know who he is and they know how big the fight is. But I still say I think it would be for the biggest paydays,
Right.
just because of his age. He needs to get in, get out, make as much money as he can before
Time runs out.
Before Father Time comes knocking.
Right. But either way, they're both in good spots. Dubois is only 23. He's still got a long time to recover, and he will recover. I'd be surprised if he doesn't recover and get back on the high horse and get some big fights and competitive fights again. And Joyce obviously just increased his payday for his next fight and maybe the ones after that as well. So either way, they're still both in good spots in their careers. And obviously we look forward to what else they bring to the table in 2021. Moving on, where we at? Staples Center here in Los Angeles with no crowd on Fight TV and Triller. It's that new app. It's a Triller pay-per-view. Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. fight to a draw. I wouldn't even call it a draw. This was an exhibition bout. It was an entertainment bout. Like, should we really analyze this like it was a fight, or was it more of an entertainment spectacle? What do you think?
Yeah, it was an entertainment spectacle. I think we kind of, spoke about it last week on the show that after, the California State Athletic Commission had told them, any blood, any big shots that looks like they're going to knock each other out, we're going to stop the fight. They're obviously trying to do this, League of Legends, where they get, other people like Evander Holyfield, probably Antonio Tarver, maybe even Chad Dawson, guys like that are obviously all going to, fight each other, raise money for charity. Let these guys also, kind of, make a little bit of money as well, because, only a very small percentage of boxers, retire wealthy enough to never work again. So it gives those guys, a way to earn some money. So, if Tyson had gone in there and, knocked Roy Jones out and sent him to hospital, straight away people are going to be like, well, what the hell are California doing? Licensing a 51-year-old and a 54-year-old, where Tyson just goes in and he's just knocked Roy Jones out, and
right,
he's now in hospital, and if even worse, something tragic happens, and he gets hurt really badly, ends up in hospital for a long time, then Andy Foster's going to be up in court, lose his license, lose his job. California is going to get sued. So, you could kind of tell it wasn't going to go down that route, even though people kind of said that, Tyson would see red mist, get in there and just, muller him.
Right. I mean, like I said, it was an entertainment event with all these musical acts. The lighting they had was like pitch black. Honestly, for being in the Staples Center and stuff like that, how they had the lighting and it was all dark. You couldn't see the seats. So obviously you couldn't see there was a bunch of empty seats, and they kind of had like an isolated stage or little ramp where all these lights, and then the big old screens on the sides with all the graphics and stuff like that. I thought the presentation looked pretty cool in terms of what they had to do for this pandemic to really make it appealing to the eye, to the television viewer. I thought they did great. I thought that they did great, and that's what I was wondering from the beginning. I was like, how are they going to do it in the Staples Center? Like, they're going to have to make everything pitch black. And I thought the atmosphere they created looked really cool. And then even when they had like the announcers, the commentary team, Mauro Ranallo, Snoop Dogg was on there. He was a highlight for a lot of people, just because of his crazy commentary. Sugar Ray Leonard was on there. Israel Adesanya from the UFC was on there.
Sugar Ray Leonard said 20 words the whole time.
He didn't really talk to them. No. He's cool. He's a legend. They just threw him in there. But I think Mauro Ranallo wasn't originally going to be the main commentator. I think it was supposed to be Al Bernstein, but I think he got COVID.
Yeah, he put on Facebook that was why.
Honestly, like, Bernstein's obviously a legend. He's a great guy, but that was a blessing in disguise for Mauro Ranallo to get the call to take his spot, because Mauro Ranallo fit in perfectly with that group.
More energetic.
He's more energetic. The puns, and especially to a lot of the casual fans who were watching that, Mauro Ranallo is a lot more appealing as a commentator, especially because he's a big hip hop head. He had Snoop Dogg there and stuff like that. He was able to throw like puns at him or say certain things and stuff like that. Like Mauro Ranallo should have been chosen from the beginning to do that, to have that spot, especially if they already knew we're going to put Snoop Dogg in here and this and that. Like Mauro Ranallo is the most well-rounded guy. He's he does WWE, he does boxing, he's done MMA. Like I think that was in terms of the commentating situation. I think that was a great move, and it really lucked out for him. But Tyson-Jones, like I told you, I watched it with my dad. My dad was entertained. He was kind of laughing at points like, man, these guys are crazy. Like, and they did their thing. And there were some moments where Tyson tries to go into the body. He was trying to dig to the body. They kept hugging and stuff like that. It was just cool to see them come out, especially Tyson come out with his black shorts and stuff like that. And, it was just cool to see. It was just cool to see in the post-fight interviews and stuff like that. And, they did what they had to do. It was entertaining and stuff like that. And I thought it was funny prior that Andy Foster, like we touched on, I don't know if we touched on it last week, but Andy Foster and the Athletic Commission of California and Triller and, the handlers of the event were kind of releasing conflicting statements about, oh no, there's going to be scoring, or no, there could be a KO, there's going to be a winner, blah, blah, even though Andy Foster had said, there's not going to be a winner or a loser. We're not going to count this professionally. It's just an exhibition. Pretty much saying like, hey, this is just a show. Well, obviously, why Triller was so pissed off, because like that was going to affect people probably buying it. Like, oh, why am I going to watch this? Like they were trying to sell it like this is real. This is real. And when you're watching the show, obviously one of their main sponsors, I think their main sponsor was DraftKings, the betting site. So because they kept putting up the betting odds throughout the broadcast and everything. Well, yeah, obviously, if the head of the commission of the state you're fighting in says, yeah, we're not going to announce a winner. There's not going to be a winner. This is just an exhibition. Pretty much like discrediting everything that is centralized around that sponsor. Obviously, they're going to come out and say, no, this is ridiculous. Like, that's not right. Like we talked about it and stuff like that, because that they want people to bet. They wanted people to watch. So I don't know. I just thought it was funny. And then like there was even people criticizing like the scorecards of Vinny Pazienza. And then who were the other two judges?
Christy Martin and Chad Dawson, wasn't it? Right.
I mean, there were people criticizing that Vinny Pazienza had multiple 10-10 rounds and stuff like that. If you're out there and you're actually criticizing these scorecards, it was a freaking show, man. It was just a show. Normally when we watch these, especially because we do the podcast every week, when we watch these fights, we're kind of watching closely and kind of scoring it in our minds or writing it down and stuff like that, just to kind of get a better understanding. This one, I was just watching it just to be entertained. Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr., it was a show. I wasn't like, even when they put up the scores and stuff, I thought it was funny. I was like, that's cool, whatever. Like, Vinny Pazienza could have scored it like 120 or to 109 or whatever. Like, who cares? It was a show. It was entertainment. At the end of the day, it was just a nostalgia factor. That was what was being sold, was the nostalgia more of Mike Tyson than Roy Jones. But people tuned in because it's Mike Tyson. Like, I honestly think, and usually some pay-per-view numbers get released like the middle of the week. I really think it's going to do really well. I really do. What do you think?
Going by what Mike Tyson put out during the week, that it had broken like all the pre-sale pay-per-view records. If that's true, then yeah, anything around 1 million would be amazing.
That's ridiculous.
In this day and age,
that's
when
ridiculous.
You only see like Conor McGregor and like Floyd Mayweather break those sorts of numbers. Yeah, that would be amazing for something that wasn't a real fight.
Right. And I mean, that's just going to show you that, like, that's just going to solidify people doing pay-per-view fights, or at least big name pay-per-view fights. Like, I mean, I know we didn't really touch on it last week, but the YouTuber Jake Paul was the co-main event against the retired basketball player Nate Robinson, and that was talked about a lot because they're social media guys, you know. And the Jake Paul gets off and he's like, "Oh, I want." Who did he call out? I don't know. Conor McGregor. I don't know who he called out. He called out somebody, a big name.
Dylan Dennis, and then Conor McGregor were the two that he posted on Instagram today.
Yeah. So I mean, but there's boxers out there, and I get it. Like, I think Jojo Diaz tweeted like, "Oh, this is a disrespect. These YouTubers fighting. You're going to get hurt." They're probably right. These guys will eventually get hurt, and then who's it going to come under? It's going to be against the commission, Andy Foster. Like, hey, why did you freaking sanction these guys? Just because they've been training for like a year, or just because they've been training for like 6 months, you license them to fight professionally without headgear and stuff like that? Like, what happens if they get hurt and it's really bad? You know, like, obviously that's a risk you're willing to take, but like, I guarantee you after that, you're never going to see YouTubers and people like that fight again. Like, you're going to need extensive experience. But as long as that doesn't happen on a large scale or a crazy scale, this is going to keep happening because those guys generate money and they generate eyeballs. That it is what it is. That's happening. Like, if some of the best fighters in the world can't crack 300,000 pay-per-view buys or 200,000 pay-per-view buys, like David Santa Cruz sold what? 150, 120, 125, something like that, around there. You know, and they're saying that Gervonta Davis is one of the biggest stars in the world, you know, and a YouTuber goes and fights and, you know, contributes to fighting to pay-per-view buys of which could be 1 million, like we said, who knows? Over 500,000 is already really good. I mean, that's going to keep happening. You can't tell me like if this YouTuber called out like Jojo Diaz or somebody, or called out somebody this or that, if they threw the money at them, like, yeah, I'll fight them for that money because that kid generates money. Do we want to see it as hardcore boxing fans? Like, oh yeah, no, obviously we don't. But that's the nature of the business right now. Is these businesses are trying to make money, and like, hey, if people tune in, even if it is teenagers or, you know, young kids, the younger generation tuning in to watch these YouTubers, why aren't we going to utilize these platforms? I mean, DAZN's already shown, just based on the numbers they did with the Jake Paul and the KSI stuff. I mean, look at how many celebrities were tweeting about it. Jack Black was there vlogging and stuff like that with his kids and stuff like that. And, you know, it is what it is, man. Like, obviously we're not fans of it. We don't want to see it in the sport, but it's going to be here. It really is going to be here. And then the whole Legends Only thing with Tyson, De La Hoya keeps doing interviews that he's trying to come back. He feels good and blah, 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 blah. And I think, I guarantee you De La Hoya is going to come back. De La Hoya will come back because he sees, especially since he saw Tyson and Roy Jones, and he thinks it's probably going to do well. Especially if he does well, De La Hoya is going to be like, damn, you know what? I think I can do it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna get a piece of that financial pie. And also he probably has an agreement with DAZN. He's like, oh yeah, I'll come back and I'll make you the money that Canelo would have made you, or something like that. You know, like, I don't know, but it was just cool to see, man. It was whole nostalgia. Mike Tyson, Roy Jones, you know, they looked in pretty good. They were in pretty good shape for over 50 years old. You know, obviously Roy Jones after like the first round was already huffing and puffing, but you know, it is what it is. But people better get used to it. These types of fights are going to be around, so it is what it is, man. It is what it is. Moving on, fight previews this upcoming Friday, the 4th of December, from the Wembley Arena in London on DAZN. Billy Joe Saunders, 29-0, goes up against Martin Murray. I can't believe Martin Murray's still around for the WBO Super Middleweight title. What do you think about this matchup, Mike?
Just Billy Joe, dude. I think every time he fights now, we've kind of said that he's never really capitalized on that signature win over David Lemieux. You know, he kind of went in there, got a big payday. Golden Boy thought they were going to invite him over, just let David Lemieux knock him out. Billy Joe Saunders kind of overturned that, did that performance where he kind of looked out to the crowd after he dodged a punch from Lemieux. His stock rose. Everybody was like, oh my God, you know, this is the guy that can defeat Canelo because, you know, he's got good feet, he moves, and we know that Canelo struggles with people like that. What's he done since then? Absolutely nothing.
Well, he got popped in Massachusetts, right? Or whatever
Yeah,
it
it was like for like a nasal spray that's like
Yeah.
legal in the UK, but it's illegal in the Massachusetts boxing committee. It's illegal on theirs,
Right.
during fight camp and all that kind of madness. But he really needs to get some names on his resume. He's 29-0, two-time, world champion, or world champion. For who? Like David Lemieux, Chris Eubank Jr.
Right.
Probably the biggest names on his resume. And we keep saying, because of the eye test, he does fit that mold of someone that we think would trouble Canelo. We're not going to say defeat him, but would trouble Canelo.
Right.
Because he hits and he moves and he's good on his feet.
Right.
But now we need some tests. He's starting to get out of shape again. He had that trouble early on in his career, and then he got himself in good shape and, started, performing better. But now it looks like he's kind of, going up and down in weight when you look at him on social media. He looks in good shape now because I actually saw his Instagram today. But, he needs the resume. It's just one of those things now. We keep hearing this about, he'd give him a good fight, give Canelo a good fight. But is he going to be another one of those guys that we just look at and think, was he sat there waiting around so long for those big fights? Amir Khan, I think has openly said that, he wasted so many years of his career waiting for Pacquiao, waiting for Floyd. Just carry on till the call comes. Just keep fighting. Fight those guys, fight the people in the resume. Like, how long is it been, 2 years now? He's supposed to have fought Andrade. Or anybody, David Benavidez, Jacobs, any of those guys in and around middleweight or super middleweight, just fight.
I think a Jacob-Saunders fight would be pretty intriguing.
Yeah,
now.
Or Benavidez, because you've got somebody that just stands and fights, is tall, heavy-handed, against someone that hits and moves, more of a boxer mover. So, styles make fights, but kind of getting sick of these, like, nobody names that he keeps fighting and picking up, WBO, super middleweight trinkets here and there. Just get in and fight somebody good, because, sometimes I can't remember the Argentinian guy he fought at the Staples Center, which he struggled to get out of there because he probably just couldn't get up for the fight because he was just fighting this nobody on the Logan Paul KSI card at Staples Center, or whoever it was, that YouTuber's card.
Tell us how you really feel, Mike. But no, I get it. I'm on the same boat. I think he just needs a signature opponent. He's a two-weight world champion, but against what? Against who? He's kind of just scraping by. I mean, is it fair to compare him in terms of maybe fights and recognition to like a Gilberto Ramirez?
Yeah, I would say so. It's him and Callum Smith. Not so much now because Callum's got that Canelo fight, but Callum Smith is very similar in the fact that he won the World Boxing Super Series. Everybody seemed to recognize him as up there as maybe the best in that division. But if you looked at the resume, is he though? He fought, he won the World Boxing Super Series, picked up some belts, fought a one-armed George Groves that retired after that fight. Hassan Undan, who moved up in weight to fight him on the Joshua Ruiz in New York. He beat him, but, it was one of those things again where it's you got to capitalize off that stock, and Callum did the same thing. Just sat there waiting around, just waiting for that Canelo fight. It's paid off because he's got him now in December, but he's wasted a year, 18 months of his career.
Right. Oh yeah, and I mean Mark Murray pops out of nowhere. Gets back into a super middleweight world title fight. Where did that come from? But like I said, Billy Joe Saunders, I think he especially following this fight, if he wins, as I think many expect him to do, he better be clamoring for a Canelo fight. Even a Callum Smith fight, I think would be do pretty decently in the UK. Assuming Callum Smith doesn't get too outclassed against Canelo or anything like that. Jacobs, and I think Billy Joe Saunders he needs a name. He needs a name. Like you said, he had so much momentum coming off of the David Lemieux fight, where people finally kind of recognize him. Like, hey, he's a problem. He's a problem for the big guys in the fight in that division. Did
you see the media video call from the fight week for the Billy Joe?
No.
they ask him about his training camp, how his training camp's been, and like as serious as he can, like on the video call, he's like, "Oh yeah, it's been good. For stamina during the camp, I've just been having a lot of sex. Like mainly outside, like in the woods, stuff like that." He's like, I've been using that, to build up my stamina, and then just carried on talking, like straight face, didn't laugh. It's on Michael Benson. Is it the guy from?
Yeah.
He posted it on Twitter, so you can find it on there.
Him and Tyson Fury are the same guys. They are. They throw that stuff out there on purpose because they know it's funny. They know people will be entertained by it. It's more of an entertainment factor in regards to their boxing career. They both do that, and they both get along. They're both friends. I mean, look at Tyson Fury. Kind of, going to him really quick when I think at the Wilder rematch, he was saying, "Oh yeah, like." Yeah. I masturbate 7 times a day or something like that. And then he was also saying that he dipped his hands in gasoline before he would spar or something like that. Like, obviously, he's just messing around. Like, or maybe he's not. Who knows? But just because we know as hardcore boxing fans or as fans, like, we know the type of personality he is. Tyson Fury is a talker. So is Billy Joe Saunders. And look at, like, Deontay Wilder at, kind of, when they had their press conference, he called that out. He's like, yeah, this guy's dipping his hands in gasoline and stuff like that. And then Tyson Fury, they put the camera on him, and he's laughing about it. He's like, damn, you idiot. Like, that's what's happening. Like, they say that on purpose. They do that on purpose so, like, people can talk about it, but it's also a form of entertainment. That's what it is. That's what it is. Like, but it's fun. It's funny, though. Like, if I'm going to watch that, you said that, where if he's just saying it as a straight face, with a straight face with no emotion, yeah, I'm just having a lot of sex in the woods and everything, and I feel great about this fight. Biggest fight of my career. That's hilarious. I mean, like, when you look, if you kind of compare it to actual professional comedians, when comedians are on stage and they say a joke and it's really funny and the crowd laughs and they keep a straight face, it makes it funnier. It makes it funnier. Like, that's what it is, man. Like, they're both gypsies, right? Him and Tyson Fury.
Yeah, they've known each other like all their life, I think.
Yeah, so I mean, they're just talkers, man. That it is what it is, but but he definitely needs a name. He needed a name now, but he definitely needs it after this for sure. Especially if he has a world title at 168 pounds. But I'm assuming he's betting on the Canelo fight, Canelo or Triple G. I'm assuming so. Moving on. This upcoming Saturday, the 5th of December, once again from the Church House in London on ESPN Plus. Lyndon Arthur, 17-0, goes up against Anthony Yarde for the Commonwealth light heavyweight title. This is Yarde's comeback fight after suffering the loss against Sergey Kovalev. What do you think about this matchup, Mike?
Good, British level fight. Good to see Anthony Yarde, back in the ring. Obviously, he had fought Dex Spellman. Was it the end of July this year? Behind closed doors, which is a common opponent for him and Lyndon Arthur, who he's fighting in this fight. So should be a good test, for him, just to see where Anthony Yarde is, because he kind of fought like a lot of, I would have said, kind of gimme fights, build up a good reputation, then, kind of jumped in with Kovalev, did fairly well against Kovalev, actually kind of rocked him, I think, in one of the 7th or 8th round, and then just kind of blew himself out, kind of like emptied his load trying to get Kovalev out of there, and just became so tired that Kovalev caught him with a jab, and that was all that she wrote for Anthony Yarde, because he just had nothing left. So it'd be kind of good to see actually how he does at this like British and European level, because he kind of played the rankings as such. Fought a lot, got quite high up there with undefeated record, a lot of knockouts, but never really anybody on his resume. So this would be interesting fight just to see, where he is at the minute.
Yeah. Assuming he wins and he looks pretty decent, I'm sure he'll be back in the mix somehow. Maybe a Kovalev rematch. You never know. Kovalev doesn't really have many options right now. I think Kovalev actually, if you think about it, after he got that Canelo fight, he lucked out, because I think if he lost, or something like that, DAZN owes him 2 fights, and they have to pay him like $2 million a piece or something like that. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. What a deal that is. But I could see an Anthony Yarde rematch, with Kovalev, or give me an Anthony Yarde versus Gilberto Ramirez, something like that. I don't know. Give me something, but we'll see. But I think he'll take it. But it seems like an intriguing matchup. It seems like an intriguing matchup, especially for the Commonwealth title. But
I'd love to see Yard in there with like a Callum Johnson, somebody like that.
Yeah, that'd be pretty sweet.
Callum Johnson, the problem with him is, he's not exactly generating a lot of money, and he's very, very good. So it's risk and reward, because don't forget, he fought Beterbiev and he dropped Beterbiev.
That's true. Yeah. So he is dangerous. He's obviously dangerous. Also on that card, Willie Hutchinson, 13-0, goes up against Lennox Clark. This is for the vacant British and Commonwealth super middleweight titles. What do you think about this matchup?
Good. Intrigued to see the step up for, Willie Hutchinson. Looks the all-round package. He's fought earlier this year, so he's already been out once. And, it's kind of an easy victory for him. He started calling out people straight away, that he wanted the British and Commonwealth, title fights. Seems to be good enough, I think, to pick it up. Going to be a good test for him, though. Obviously going in there with his best, opponent during his pro career so far. I think everybody in the UK is kind of high on, Willie Hutchinson out of the Ingle gym. They've created so many good fighters over the years. And he just looks to be like another one really just coming off that conveyor belt.
Off of the conveyor belt. Also this Saturday from the AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, where the Dallas Cowboys American football team plays. On Fox pay-per-view, another pay-per-view, back-to-back pay-per-view weekends, huh, Mike? Errol Spence Jr. returning since the first time from his car crash last year, that really bad car crash in that big, expensive sports, foreign car. I think it was Lamborghini or something like that. 26-0, goes up against Danny Garcia. This is a unification matchup. Well, not unification, but unified titles, WBC and IBF welterweight titles that Spence currently holds. I'm impressed. I'm impressed for Spence because, he's really given it to Crawford in terms of legacy, in terms of coming off of that, almost life-ending car crash he had last year in Texas. I think there was a lot of people. I think we even talked about it on our episodes following that news, especially after some photos were released of how he looked and all the reports we were hearing, and then people were reporting that it was probably worse than people thought. I think we had mentioned we can't really blame him if he recovers and he takes like an easy fight in between, just to kind of get his bearings back, to kind of get back in the rhythm. No,
Lemon did.
Yeah, right. I mean, but look, he did it, man. He goes up against one of the best guys in the world at 147 pounds, and Danny Garcia. Even though Danny Garcia, he lost to Thurman, he lost to Sean Porter. Danny Garcia is still dangerous. He has that power. We saw when he knocked out Brandon Rios. I think that was his most recent knockout in Vegas. Danny Garcia is he just has that. Would you call it an X factor? He's a dangerous fighter. He's a very dangerous fighter.
He's funny because you always get all over social media Danny Garcia, he's a freaking cherry picker. And then you look at his resume: Eric Morales, Amir Khan, Zab Judah, Lucas Matisse, Nate Campbell, Kendall Hall, Lamont Peterson, Paulie Malignaggi, Robert Guerrero. And then you think, fuck, that's a good list of modern day fighters.
And he beat Lucas Matisse. Didn't he beat Lucas Matisse? He gave him his first loss?
Yep.
And Matisse at that time was a killer.
Yep.
Was a killer. So, yeah, people call him cherry picker and stuff like that. But he's fought some killers. He has a really good resume.
It's kind of odd when you think about it, and you obviously the resume that I just read off, you think, where does he get that name as a cherry picker? And wasn't it Morales tested positive and he fought him anyway?
Yeah, I think so.
Remember that?
I think people were just judging him based off the more recent fights from recent memory, because he fought Adrian Granados and whoever else and stuff like that. As the PBC kind of came into its own. So people started obviously he's been gaining a lot more attention on himself the last couple of years than he did when he fought those names. So there's a lot more eyeballs on him. So obviously there's going to be a lot more criticism. Oh, is he not fighting anything? But I guarantee you, of all those people who started watching his career within the last couple of years who have been criticizing him as a cherry picker, if they were watching him during those times where he fought Amir Khan, Lucas Matisse, Lamont Peterson, Robert Guerrero or whatever, I mean, they'd probably be singing a different tune, and there's also people who, you become a hater because of his dad or the lifestyle he lives and stuff. And Angel Garcia, crazy Angel Garcia, for the personality he has, So, I mean, it is what it is. But this is a very intriguing matchup. This is a great matchup. It sucks that it's pay-per-view, especially as we had back-to-back pay-per-views. But there's going to be a crowd. There's going to be some type of crowd. I mean, Texas is open to an extent. They're going to have maybe 20,000 people, 25. I don't know. I don't know what. And it fits 100,000 people, but I don't know. I'm not familiar with the exact parameters of the regulations and the public health orders in the state of Texas right now. But I'm assuming it'll probably be 15, 20,000 people, something like that. But this is an intriguing matchup. This is obviously Spence is a favorite. At least to me, he's a favorite. I think to a lot of bookies and a lot of betting sites, he is a favorite. But you can't count out Danny Garcia, especially with that no-look hook that he always seems to catch people with. And he can take a punch. He can take a punch. This is a very intriguing matchup. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that, you know what? I don't want to say Garcia wins it, but I can't say I would be surprised if he does. What do you think?
Like you touched on, it's a very intriguing fight because you do wonder, what Errol Spence is going to step through the ropes. Was it just superficial wounds from that car crash, or is there more? Is there something below the surface? Because he kind of went just dark. He went off the radar for a long period of time. We didn't know the extent of the injuries. A lot of people were kind of saying that all of his teeth got knocked out, and that's why he wasn't sparring. He hadn't been in the gym. And then when we did see him on TV, I'm not too sure whether it was medication or whether he'd been drinking because he was kind of slurring his words pretty badly.
Yeah, I think he was drinking.
Yeah, so you don't know. We don't really know the extent of the injuries for him. And then you do wonder, is he coming back and fighting someone good like Danny Garcia because he's 100%? Or is he coming back to cash out because he knows, do his team know, hey, he's not going to be able to box, for long due to the injuries. So we'll just come back, we'll cash out a big payday against Danny Garcia and then maybe a couple of others, and that's us done. So obviously time will tell. When we get to Saturday, and kind of similar for Danny Garcia, I always do wonder how much does he have left because he's kind of been at the peak. He's been up there. He's been a world champion. He's fought a lot of big names. When does it get to the point where he's just sick of coming to camp? He's had 38 fights, earned good money. Is the hunger still there? That's what I always do wonder with Danny Garcia. But it's an intriguing fight, especially stylistically as well. It's
right.
Danny Garcia is one of those fighters that he throws at the same time as you. He waits for you to throw. He doesn't really ever lead, and he just waits and tries to get off those hooks, like you mentioned. He's kind of known for that big left hook of his.
Right.
It's an intriguing fight. If both of them walk through the ropes at 100%, I think obviously we all favor Errol.
Right. But we don't. But that's the thing. I think that also makes it so intriguing is that we don't know what type of Errol Spence this is going to be because that crash was very significant. Mm-hmm. He could have died. Imagine if he would have died, a unified welterweight world champion of the world in the sport of boxing, one of the most best fighters in the world in the sport, tragically dies. I mean, fortunately he didn't. But that was really bad. That was a really bad crash. And I think he knows that. I think he knows that, somebody was looking after him that day because he survived. And, I mean, you mentioned he was on that broadcast and we don't know if it was medication or drinking. I mean, we've seen that he likes to drink. It's not a secret. So I think he was just drinking and he was just like, hey, whatever. But this is the first time. I mean, I don't know how he's been looking at sparring, but this is the first time he's going to be in a real, physical fight since that crash. And that's very intriguing. I think personally, he's still going to be what he once was. I think he's still going to find that rhythm and do what he needs to do. But who knows? Who knows what happens? But like I said, this is a very intriguing fight. What if Danny Garcia pulls off the win? What if Danny Garcia and becomes unified champion? What happens to the Terrence Crawford fight? How much leverage does that give Terrence Crawford in terms of, the reported mega fight between him and Spence? Honestly, how smart would it be if Terrence Crawford was at this fight this Saturday? Like if he called Spence and said, "Hey, give me a front row ticket. I want to be there." Like for his name and to get traction on this fight, he should go. He needs to be there. Right?
Yeah, I mean, we've been saying it for, God knows how long. And it was funny that, Adam Cattrall was kind of chatting about Crawford recently, saying the difference between, interviewing Teofimo Lopez, who kind of understands the sport, understands PR, where he said that, he was chatting to Terrence Crawford for, I think it was BT Sport, for the Kell Brook fight, via like Zoom or something. And he said all the way through the interview, Terrence Crawford just sat there playing PlayStation.
Oh gosh.
Yeah,
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, he wasn't interested, didn't really want to, was just sat, not even looking, just playing PlayStation, just kind of answering the questions. And he was just saying, that's kind of one of the reasons I think, people like Bob Arum are kind of pissed because, he's paying him a good purse and, you have to come back and promote yourself as well. You have to promote your own, you're essentially your own brand, your own commodity, like they're going to push you a certain amount, but you need to do it yourself as well.
Right.
That's the difference.
Talking about the Terrence Crawford fight, like there's been people, I think like his sister's also on Twitter has been criticizing Bob Arum after those comments, like, "Oh, well, you're his promoter. It's your job to promote him." Well, from a PR standpoint, as his promoter, you got to look at it that way. Like he sucks at interviews. He's not a good talker. So it's not like you can put him on these late night talk shows or these interview shows in the United States or the UK and stuff like that, and expect him to come over well to that casual viewer on television. Like, he's not going to go over well. Like, that's why you see guys like, for as much as people hate him or whatever, like Ryan Garcia, like he's here on local TV sometimes, KTLA morning news here in Los Angeles. They put him on there because, he can decently talk. He can muster his sentences and do what he needs to do to market himself. Floyd Mayweather's been on, late night shows and stuff like that. Manny Pacquiao, even though he can't really English isn't his first language, but he's relatable and people like him and stuff like that. Like Tyson Fury, same thing, and it's not like Crawford's been on the biggest sports channel arguably in the world and on ESPN, multiple fights. He's had the platform. They made, behind the scenes stuff about him and everything. But, like you said, he wants bigger fights. He wants bigger this, recognition, that. Obviously, if he was able to, like a Teofimo Lopez, to really understand the PR side of things, to really sell himself like that, even though he's already, in terms of hardcore fans, people recognize him. But if he can sell himself as a brand or position him as a brand, how much more leverage would that give him in Top Rank to get a Spence fight, to get a Sean Porter or Danny Garcia or whoever, if his brand generates more money in and of itself, they're going to be like, well, damn, there's a lot of money on the table, even if I don't want to fight him, that's too much money to pass up, yeah, I don't know. It is what it is, but, kind of going back to Spence-Garcia. All right, gun to your head, Mike. Who wins?
Obviously, we don't have much to go off in terms of injuries and where Errol Spence is. So, assuming that he's good enough to fight and that's why they've taken it, I think Errol.
Oh, you know what? I know I said Spence. I know I said I wouldn't be surprised if Garcia won, but I lean towards Spence. Just to make it interesting, I'm going Garcia. I think Danny Garcia gets the win and becomes unified champ. I think. I don't know. Maybe because we have the same first name. But
stops him.
I don't know, man. That no look hook where he doesn't even look at you, but he connects. I don't know, man. This is intriguing. Like all these welterweights, Porter, Garcia, Spence, rotating them. It's interesting. It really is. I think maybe. Spence goes down once. I'm going out on a limb here. I'm just trying to make it entertaining.
There we go.
I'm going Garcia, man. I'm going Danny Garcia. He becomes new unified champ. But either way, this is an intriguing matchup. It's a very intriguing matchup. Also on that card, local Southern California fighter Josecito Lopez out of the Robert Garcia Boxing Academy, 37-8, goes up against Francisco. Is this Chia Santana?
Yes, sir.
Francisco Chia Santana. What do you think about this matchup?
Interesting, local fight. I'm sure these guys have probably, sparred many rounds together, both being from, the Southern California area. I thought Josecito Lopez would kind of, leaped off that, good performance he had against Keith Thurman, where, Keith Thurman came back, kind of picked, Josecito Lopez as his comeback fight. And it seemed that night that it could have been the wrong guy. Josecito Lopez looked really good. And then he kind of didn't really leap off that like I thought he would have done. Kind of sat on the shelf for a little bit longer. But I think he'll be too good for, Chia Santana. I think Josecito Lopez wins this for me quite easily. I've never really rated Santana, to be honest.
You never know. This is also kind of an intriguing matchup, because like you said, like they've probably sparred quite a few times being from the Southern California area. So they've at least seen each other once or twice in training. So they kind of might know what they're getting themselves into from both sides of the corners here. So, we'll see. It's a nice little matchup. Obviously, everybody's going to tune in for Garcia Spence, but, kind of add this into the mix just to kind of keep people's attention. And Josecito Lopez, he's in pretty decent fights. He got a win over Victor Ortiz and he got a Canelo fight. Whoever would have thought that, but who knows? News and notes as we round the corner towards the finish line here of this episode of The Last Round. 3-division boxing title holder and 2-time Olympic gold medalist Claressa Shields, arguably the best pound for pound. I said arguably, Mike, best pound for pound female fighter in the world, has officially made her move to the MMA world, as it was announced, I believe today, within the last few hours, that she has signed a deal with PFL, the Professional Fighters League. She's making her MMA debut. I think she sees how Heather Hardy went over there, and Heather Hardy has said in interviews, like, I get paid more in MMA and Bellator than I do in boxing. And I think Claressa Shields, obviously, it doesn't seem like the demand from boxing promoters were really at her doorstep trying to sign her. Obviously, it doesn't seem like that was happening. So she made the move to MMA. I mean, what do you think about this news?
It's interesting. I don't know how it's going to go for her. I'm sure, like, if she steps into the MMA cage anytime within the next year, she'll get absolutely smoked, because I'm pretty sure she has zero ground game since she's been a boxer her entire life. So unless she's been wrestling or doing, jiu-jitsu behind the scenes for many years, then it's going to be quite embarrassing for her, I would imagine.
Do you think this is her way to try to, like, market herself? Like, let's just say she does well and she wins a couple and she kind of builds her name in the MMA community, and UFC kind of notices, and it's just like, hey, you want to come over here for a fight or two? Maybe that's the end game.
I mean, I thought that she was just going to do, like cross-promotional stuff. She was going to fight like Amanda Nunes in the boxing ring, stuff like that. She's the self-anointed GOAT, and, she always goes on about how much money she gets paid. Then why is she going over to MMA? Why is she not? Look at Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor. Did they fight in MMA, or did Floyd drag him into boxing?
Right.
Dragged him into boxing. So why is she not dragging, like Amanda Nunes, Cyborg, people like that into the boxing ring? Because it's easier for them to try to get a hold of one, facet of the sport, as in stand-up, than it is for her to go away and learn multiple different arts to get into the cage and fight somebody that's been doing it since they were a child.
Right.
I don't see her fighting in the PFL anytime soon unless it's against a real gimme, part-time taxi driver type of lady. She may sign up with the PFL. It's all media, and she goes away for a whole year and fights in 2022, something like that. But I thought the Nunez and the Cyborg fights seemed more realistic because they already do stand up.
Right.
It'd be, a fight in the boxing ring without, any takedowns and stuff like that. So
I got to talk to we got to talk to our friends over there at the Coast to Coast Combat Hour, Carbezo and the Hawk, who have their own podcast, since they're very familiar with obviously the MMA community and the Professional Fighters League, PFL and stuff like that. I'd like to pick their brain to see if, what they think about this move and who are potential opponents for her in MMA, who they think like, hey, she probably has a shot against this person, or no, if she faces this gal, she'll get killed in the MMA octagon or whatever. It's intriguing. It really is intriguing. Her being a unified, undisputed or whatever boxing world female champion, like now she's going to MMA. Hey, I don't think it's a secret that MMA female fighters have been making more money than boxing female fighters the last 10 or so years. So she's going to go over there and try to get a piece of that pie and see if she can raise her stock. You never know. In terms of marketability and raising her stock, I think it's a pretty decent move. It could work out.
I bet she gets paid well, though.
I'm sure she does.
I bet her and Katie Taylor probably get paid pretty well, for female fighters, especially Katie. I think I'm sure Eddie said that she's in like hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, I'm sure they're getting paid decently, but who knows? Who knows? This could either go really well for her or it could really backfire. She could get really hurt, or who knows? Who knows? But either way, you got to give her credit. She's stepping into an MMA octagon. Like, it's not just two fists anymore. It's like submissions, it's leg kicks, thigh kicks. Like, it's a lot more. There's a lot more tools in that fighting arsenal now that she's opening herself up to. So either way, you got to give her credit for that. She's deciding to go in there. It's not easy. It's already hard enough to step into a boxing ring. It's arguably even harder enough to go into an MMA ring where you have to watch out for legs, submission holds, triangle holds, stuff like that. That's crazy. It's intriguing though. I'll be watching to see how it goes. Rounding off the show here from a minimum weight fight. Man, we never talk about these minimum weight fighters. All right, Mike, you're taking this one because this is a tough name for me.
Wanheng Menyothin, I believe is how you pronounce it. People may remember the name because, around the same time as, Floyd Mayweather was trying to go 50-0. He was doing the same thing, down in minimum weight. Actually managed to go 54-0. Signed with Golden Boy, if you remember, Danny. And then, surprisingly retired out of nowhere. Came back out of retirement. This was his first fight back and actually fought CP Freshmart and lost. A trio of 115, 113 scorecards. It sounded like, I haven't seen it, but I read it, that CP Freshmart started really, really quick, just kind of racked up the rounds, and there was no comeback.
Is this guy's name really CP Freshmart?
Yeah, that's what they call him, yeah.
Oh, it's like his nickname?
Yeah.
Because I was reading it, I was just like, is that like the venue where they fought? Oh, that was pretty funny. I was like, oh, these guys, he probably beat this guy at some venue called CP Freshmart or something like that. But yeah, I think there was I was obviously as a hardcore boxing fan, his name was kind of associated with Mayweather's because the whole 50-0 thing, or 50 and so, and obviously he didn't get the recognition because he fights at such a lower weight class and stuff like that. And the competition isn't as prevalent as it was for Mayweather in the welterweight division and super welterweight division and stuff like that. But 54-1 at the moment, it's pretty impressive regardless. Very, very impressive regardless. So we'll see how is he going to retire? Did he retire after this, or is he done?
I'm not. He didn't say, because obviously he retired, came back, lost, and then is he going to go back into retirement again? I don't know. Is he going to want to come back and finish get that W and then retire?
Who knows? But as we wrap up here, Mike, coming off of the Tyson-Roy Jones Jr. matchup, which we could see a rematch. I know people might not want to hear that, but who knows? As we round it up here, go ahead, Mike, and let our followers and our listeners know where they can find us on the social channels.
At the Last Round 12 on Instagram and Twitter. And obviously joining next week, we'll be reviewing the Errol Spence-Danny Garcia fight and then previewing Anthony Joshua against Kubrat Pulev. Previewing. So once again, for my co-host, Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round